Welcome back everyone to another video about the Weimar Republic. Now I'm History with Hilbert, and today I'm going to be asking the question, how did the Weimar government work? First of all, I'm going to take a look at the Reichstag, which means Diet of the Realm. Now diet can be when you change your food for a certain purpose, but it can also mean a type of parliament, a place where people come together to enact laws, and that's obviously what it means in this case. And the Reichstag in the German system is comparable to the House of Commons in the British system, which we have in Westminster at the moment, where people come together to enact laws. Now, the Reichstag was voted, the members who sat in the Reichstag obviously were voted for every 4 years, and they could be voted in by anyone over the age of 20, both men and women, which meant that the German society at the time was more liberal than other countries in Europe. For example, the United Kingdom and France. There was more suffrage in Germany than there was in these places at the time. Now, there were obviously people didn't vote for random people. Often they voted for people representing certain political parties, as they still do, although there were people who were voted in on a non-party specific platform. But these are some of the largest parties during the period of the Weimar Republic in Germany. Sort of on the left I have the more left-wing parties, right the way to the Marxists and the Communists, and on the right obviously I have the varying degrees of how right-wing or left-wing they are. Obviously it's sometimes difficult to place them. So if then you have an election and obviously people then vote for these certain parties, it means that a certain amount of seats will go to some of these people. Now usually there were around 423 seats in the Reichstag, and this would mean that these would be filled proportionally to the amount of people who voted for certain people standing for certain parties. And the system was proportional representation, which meant that if one person voted for a party, then that would be one vote that would count. And if roughly 60,000 other people also voted for that party, so let's say this guy's called Klaus, and Klaus is an industrial worker, he's got his apron on, and he's voted for the KPD. Now, if another 60,000 people voted for the KPD, then that would equal one seat in the Reichstag, which would mean they were being represented proportionally, because it was proportional to the amount of people in the country at the time. And there are a lot of pros and cons with this, but I'm going to dive into that in another video. So what was the purpose of the Reichstag? Well, the Reichstag, they started to enact laws that were bills into the actual law. So when people think there should be a new law, for example, if people think that they've been working very hard and they deserve a new pension fund or a pension scheme, something like that, and they want it into law that they can retire at the age of 70 instead of 75, then this would be a law that they would vote on, and depending on whether the majority voted yes or no, this would be then passed into law, as well as fulfilling other functions like that. Now, where did they get these laws from? Well, they were given these laws to vote on by the Chancellor, and the Chancellor is one of the most important positions during in the Weimar system of government. Now, the Chancellor had to have 50% support from the Reichstag, and obviously this could be very difficult, because if you know anything about the Weimar Republic, you'll know that there were so many different parties, some of which I actually showed just now, that they were completely, or most of the time they were arguing with one another, so this could be a real issue. Now, as well, the Chancellor had their Reichsrat to help him decide upon certain issues. They were there to advise him. And the Reichsrat means something like the Council of the Realm. Council, as in Rat, is obviously council in German. It's also found in Old English, if you're interested in the name of the Anglo-Saxon king Athelred. Red means council, Athel is noble, so his name is a compound word, and it means noble council. It's also in Dutch, if you give someone advice, dan geef je hem een beetje raad, which means, you know, you give them a bit of advice. And this was, again, then Reich means realm, so then you have the Council of the Realm. And essentially this is what they did. They're comparable to the House of Lords, so a more formal kind of upper class system. And the way that they were voted in, or well, they weren't really voted in, is because they were representative of the 17 or 18 different Länder, and the Länder are the states in Germany. I've put some of the larger ones on here. Prussia was by far the largest state and actually extended up in the east as well, but I decided not to add it on my map because it's a bit complicated when you get the whole Poland situation with the sea, the arm to the sea that the Allies, you know, they really made a mess after Versailles. States were also proportional to the amount of people there, so there were 67 representatives, and they were generally divided along these lines that the larger states with the largest population got to send more people. So for example, Prussia, which was by far the largest in terms of geography and also the population, had 25 representatives in the Reichsrat, whereas Bavaria, the next largest one, had only 7. They did actually veto Prussia because Prussia had dominated in the old system of the Second Reich, and it meant that no more than 40 representatives could be sent from Prussia at one time. So they tried to curb Prussia's influence, because obviously Prussia had been the kingdom which had united the German states to begin with, and the Weimar Republic didn't want them to be too powerful or to represent the old Reich too much. And they could also actually veto laws which were passed by the Reichstag, but then the Reichstag could essentially counter-veto this veto of the Reichsrat if they had 2/3 of a majority counter-vetoing the veto proposal of the Reichsrat, which is a bit complicated. But this never really happened. As I mentioned, the Reichstag was often very divided among party political lines. They found it hard enough to form coalitions, let alone to agree on anything when they were in a coalition. So most of the time, when things were vetoed by the Reichsrat, they weren't passed into law at all, because there was just not enough unity within the Reichstag. Now finally, we have the role of president, and this is a very important role in the Weimar Republic. It's the most powerful role as well, because they really do decide almost everything. So the president was voted in every 7 years, again by every man and woman who was eligible to vote above the age of 20. They could then vote for the candidate they would like to see as their next president. The president was very important, because he was the one who could control who would become the next chancellor. Now often what happened was that the party in an election who won the most seats, they would have their leader or someone influential from that party, they would become the chancellor. That's often what happened, but not always, as you will remember if you watched my earlier videos on the rise to power of Adolf Hitler, because it very much annoyed Hitler when his party became the largest party in the Reichstag, yet President Hindenburg didn't make him the chancellor. So it didn't always happen, it didn't have to happen, but they usually went along lines like that the leader of the largest party became the chancellor, and the president got to choose that chancellor. Now, within the Reichstag itself, the president also had a lot of control. Obviously, he could choose the chancellor, who is essentially the head of the Reichsrat, but also he could dissolve the Reichstag at any time he wanted if he wasn't happy with how it was going, and then there would have to be new elections. And this happened a lot of the time during the Weimar Republic, often when the president wasn't happy when things were going, or when the chancellor wasn't happy with things, how they were going, they would then ask the president to dissolve the parliament so they could get a new vote in. Now as well, the president was the head of the army. Now this is for a special reason. Of course, he is the most powerful man in the country, and it's not too bad when you consider the first president was Friedrich Ebert of the Sozialdemokratische Partei Deutschland, the Social Democratic Party of Germany. But when you consider the second president voted in 1925 was Paul von Hindenburg, he was the one of them, along with Ludendorff, one of the highest ranking officers in the German army in the First World War. Then you can see why some people thought that this was essentially just the old Kaiserreich, but with a different guise, because they were in control of the army. They could also use what was called Article 48 to if they thought they were in a time of crisis, in time of emergency, they could essentially bypass the Reichstag completely by signing things into law by using a diktat. And a diktat is the German word for dictate or dictation, and it essentially meant that they could pass things into law if no one was agreeing in Parliament, and this happened in 1932, right before Hitler came to power. No one could agree during the chancellorship of Hermann Brüning, so the president at the time, Hindenburg, just passed everything through that he approved of. And you can see why this is a huge issue, because that's essentially just the same as the old Kaiser. He was completely in control and he could do something similar. So you see that even though Weimar is doing its best to be democratic, there are certainly still autocratic elements to the way that the government functioned. Alright everyone, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this quick little video on the Weimar government and how it functioned. I've gone through sort of the different houses that they had in the Weimar Republic, with things like the Reichsrat and the Reichstag, as well as the various roles of President and Chancellor and who got to vote, sort of the parties that they voted for, and things like that. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I have links to other videos on the Weimar Republic and other periods of history and related things that you may find interesting if you haven't watched them already. I'd very much appreciate it if you did give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. If you'd like to know anything else, just comment in the comment section below, and I hope to see you all again very soon.